Imagine walking into the home of a seemingly ordinary suburban family, a place where laughter once echoed through the halls, where decades of shared life should have promised safety and trust. Now, picture that same home shrouded in silence, hiding a horror so unfathomable it defies comprehension. A man vanishes without a trace, only for the shocking truth to emerge months later, brutal, calculated. Murder, a body, dismembered and scattered across a city, a wife who becomes the prime suspect in one of the most chilling domestic cases in modern Australian history. What drives someone to turn a life they promised to protect into a scene of unimaginable terror? Tonight, we dive into the story of Mamda Imad Nufel, his mysterious disappearance, and the dark spiral that allegedly led his wife, Nermeen Nufel, down a path of murder, deception, and a macabre cover-up. Mamda Imad Nufel had lived a life that on the surface seemed ordinary, even peaceful. A man in his early 60s, he and his wife, Nermeen, had built a home together in Grinaka, a quiet suburb in southwest Sydney. Their lives, like so many immigrant families, had been a careful balancing act between preserving the traditions of their homeland and adapting to the rhythms of a new country. The couple had 8 children, all adults now, scattered between their 20s and 30s. Friends described Mamda as diligent and reserved, a man whose life revolved around his family, his work, and the familiar routines of daily life. To the outside world, the Nufel household looked like any other. Mornings would see Mamda leaving the house quietly, perhaps for work or errands, and evenings were spent in the company of his family. Neighbors would occasionally catch glimpses of the family at local stores or walking through the streets of Grinaka, smiling, waving, appearing normal in every way. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. What outsiders could not see were the tensions that simmered behind closed doors, the fractures that grew in silence, and the private grievances that festered like hidden rot. Nermeen Nufel, a woman 5 years Mamda's junior, was often described as fiercely private. Friends said she carried herself with composure, even in stressful situations, but her composure masked years of strain, frustration, and what would later be revealed as deep-seated resentment. According to court filings and police reports, the marriage was marred by incidents of domestic violence, emotional manipulation, and a long history of tension between the couple. Mamda allegedly had an extramarital affair in Egypt, engaging with another woman while maintaining the facade of a loyal husband at home. For Nermeen, this betrayal was not a distant affair. It was a personal wound, an ongoing source of humiliation and anger. The psychological toll of living under such circumstances cannot be overstated. Living in the shadow of a partner's duplicity can erode one's sense of self, breeding resentment and desperation. Despite the undercurrents of marital strife, the family outwardly maintained appearances. Nermeen handled the household, managed the family's finances, and navigated the delicate balance of raising adult children while coping with a husband whose behavior was unpredictable. Yet, the cracks in the family's facade grew wider with every hidden argument, every accusation, and every moment of tension. Friends and relatives later described a household that was tense and emotionally charged, a place where love and fear existed in uneasy proximity. Within the home, tensions had been mounting. Police reports cited multiple domestic incidents, one of which allegedly involved Mamda drawing a knife on Nermeen. Long-standing patterns of abuse, combined with emotional strain and financial stress, had created an environment ripe for conflict. The atmosphere in the house was reportedly volatile. Small disagreements could escalate rapidly, and private grievances remained largely invisible to the outside world. Mamda's daily life was routine. He would leave for work or errands, check in with family members, and return in the evening. Friends assumed he might occasionally travel overseas or attend to family matters abroad. But in reality, by May 2023, something was shifting in Nermeen's behavior. According to investigators, she had begun taking control of her husband's communications, his phone, social media, and online accounts. In retrospect, this may have been a way to assert control, a prelude to something far darker. The manipulation of these accounts would later form part of a disturbing pattern of deception that played a critical role in delaying suspicion of foul play. As the days passed, Mamda's presence became increasingly inconsistent. Small discrepancies appeared. Friends noted that messages and posts from his accounts began to carry a tone that was unfamiliar, inconsistent with the man they knew. A casual observer might have shrugged it off, assuming the difference was the result of stress, a busy schedule, or even a joke. But these were the first subtle signs that something was profoundly wrong. By July 2023, nearly 2 months after Mamda was last seen, family and friends began to grow concerned. Initially, they assumed he might be traveling overseas or attending to obligations in Egypt, especially given the recent consulate trip. But repeated attempts to contact him failed. Emails went unanswered, calls were ignored, and messages that should have been routine went unreturned. The concern gradually escalated into alarm. It was no longer a question of temporary absence, it was now a mystery. Meanwhile, within the home, investigators would later allege Nermin continued to project the illusion that Mamda was alive. Police believe she used his social media and banking accounts, crafting messages and posts with a deliberate inconsistency in language and tone to suggest normal activity. This ruse was effective, at least temporarily. To an outsider, Mamda seemed absent, not missing, and suspicion did not immediately fall on his wife. The family dynamic was complex. The couple's 8 children were adults, yet the domestic tensions between their parents cast a long shadow over the household. According to court reports, Nermin was struggling under the weight of an unhappy marriage, years of alleged abuse, and the discovery of her husband's extramarital affair. Police and prosecutors would later argue that these pressures, combined with a desire for financial independence and autonomy, may have contributed to the alleged crime that would soon shatter the family forever. The night of May 3, 2023, began like any other, at least to the casual observer. Greenacre, a quiet Sydney suburb, was settled into its familiar evening rhythm. Streetlights cast long shadows on tree-lined streets. The distant hum of traffic was punctuated by occasional barking dogs, and inside the Newfuel home on Juno Parade, the curtains were drawn, hiding whatever tensions simmered within. But that night, behind closed doors, the ordinary rhythms of domestic life would shatter forever. Inside the home, according to investigators, Nermin Newfuel confronted Mamda. The air, already heavy with years of unresolved conflict, became electric with anger and fear. The precise trigger of the confrontation is unknown, but police later indicated that the argument escalated rapidly, fueled by a volatile mix of betrayal, resentment, and long-standing abuse. What began as a domestic disagreement, investigators allege, transformed into a deadly encounter. Mamda, a man who had once seemed calm and reserved, now faced a moment that would end his life. The tools that would make this night unforgettable in its horror were ordinary household instruments, yet in the hands of a determined aggressor, they became instruments of terror. Knives, the kind used for routine meal preparation, became weapons. A power saw, designed for carpentry, became an instrument of dismemberment. According to prosecutors, the act was deliberate, controlled, and chillingly calculated. By the time investigators became fully involved, the scene they encountered was already transformed. According to police reports, Nermin had allegedly carried out an extensive cleanup of the home, even replacing floors to remove evidence. Every step appeared calculated, a deliberate effort to erase the past, and every detail suggested a level of premeditation that was chilling. What had begun as a domestic conflict now revealed the hallmarks of a macabre, methodical crime. Detective Superintendent Danny Doherty described the crime as brutal, macabre, and bizarre, placing it among the most unusual domestic homicides the NSW police had ever encountered. There was a method to the horror. Once Mamda was killed, the body was dismembered. The physical violence was horrifying, but the psychological component was equally significant. Investigators noted the cold, meticulous planning required to execute such an act in a domestic space, especially one shared with a large family. The house that had been filled with years of family memories now became a crime scene of unthinkable proportions. Once the alleged killing was complete, Nermin reportedly began the process of disposal and concealment. Mamda's remains, according to police allegations, were cut into multiple pieces and placed into 20 to 30 separate plastic bags. The sheer scale of this act speaks to both a determination to obliterate the evidence and a chilling detachment from the humanity of the victim. Each step was a calculated move in a disturbing psychological game, designed to erase all traces of the man who had once been the center of her domestic world. The disposal of the remains extended beyond the home. Allegedly, Nermin transported the bags across multiple suburbs in southwest Sydney, strategically discarding them in both residential and commercial bins. The method was deliberate, intended to make recovery impossible and to complicate the work of any potential investigators. This level of foresight and planning indicated, according to police, a premeditated intent not only to kill, but also to ensure that Mamda Newfall's body would never be found. Detective Superintendent Doherty expressed doubts that the remains would ever be located, underscoring the chilling thoroughness of the alleged disposal. Back at the Greenocker home, Nerman is said to have conducted an extensive cleanup operation. Floors were replaced and surfaces were scrubbed, a meticulous effort to eliminate traces of the crime. Beyond the physical alterations, Nerman allegedly undertook a psychological cover-up, taking control of her husband's phone and social media accounts. She posted and messaged in his name, maintaining the illusion that he was still alive. She even continued to use his bank accounts, a deliberate effort to delay suspicion and maintain the appearance of normalcy. Every action, investigators argue, was a calculated effort to control the narrative, to manipulate perception, and to buy time before the truth emerged. Initially treated as a missing person case, the situation quickly raised red flags. Investigators noted inconsistencies in Nerman's accounts of her husband's whereabouts, stories that didn't add up, explanations that seemed rehearsed, and subtle missteps suggested a level of deception that could not be ignored. By January 2024, the missing person investigation transitioned into a suspected murder inquiry. Homicide detectives, supported by the NSW Crime Commission, took over, meticulously reconstructing timelines, communications, and movements. The investigation revealed a complex web of lies that Nerman allegedly spun to obscure her actions. The use of Mamdou's accounts after his disappearance created a delay in raising suspicion. Friends and acquaintances were initially reassured that he was alive, unaware that the communication was coming from the very person accused of his murder. Each lie was carefully crafted, a psychological shield designed to manipulate perception, while the physical evidence was hidden or destroyed. Detectives faced a chilling realization. They were not just dealing with a murder, but with an elaborate cover-up executed with extraordinary precision. The absence of a body made the case exceptionally difficult, and yet, circumstantial evidence mounted with every passing day. Witness testimonies, inconsistencies in Nerman's statements, and forensic examination of the home all began to paint a grim picture. Investigators noted that the deliberate use of multiple disposal sites for the remains and the extensive cleaning at the home indicated premeditation. This was no crime of passion. It was a calculated act designed to eliminate both the victim and the evidence of the crime itself. The psychological dimension of the case fascinated and horrified law enforcement. Here was a woman, authorities allege, who had committed an act of extreme violence, yet immediately transitioned into the role of manipulator, deceiving friends, family, and even investigators. Her actions suggested an understanding of forensic procedures, a strategic mind capable of compartmentalizing horror, and an ability to manage the perceptions of those around her. The juxtaposition of domestic normalcy and calculated brutality created a sense of disbelief even among experienced detectives. As the investigation progressed, officers began piecing together the timeline of events on May 3rd. The couple's trip to the consulate provided both the motive and the opportunity, according to prosecutors. The granting of power of attorney gave Nerman legal control over the family's overseas assets. The timing of the alleged murder allowed her to execute the act while minimizing the risk of immediate detection. What might have seemed like routine paperwork now appeared, in retrospect, as a pivotal moment in the orchestration of a chilling crime. Detective Superintendent Doherty repeatedly described the case as bizarre, emphasizing both the brutality and the methodical execution of the crime. The dismemberment, the extensive cleaning, and the deception following the disappearance were all highly unusual in domestic homicide cases. Experts noted that the level of planning and the emotional detachment required to carry out such acts in one's own home represented a rare convergence of domestic conflict and extreme criminal behavior. By the time law enforcement focused on Nerman as a suspect, the evidence, though circumstantial, was compelling. The combination of premeditated opportunity, motive linked to both financial gain and escape from an abusive marriage, and the psychological manipulation of the victim's digital footprint created a portrait of a crime that was both calculated and deeply disturbing. Investigators emphasized that even without a body, the pattern of behavior, witness statements, and forensic clues formed a cohesive narrative pointing to her responsibility. Meanwhile, the broader community watched in horror as details emerged. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues struggled to reconcile the image of a seemingly normal suburban household with the allegations of murder, dismemberment, and deception. The thought that such violence could unfold behind the familiar facades of domestic life intensified the fear and fascination surrounding the case. For many, it underscored a terrifying truth: the most shocking crimes can occur in the most ordinary settings. The investigation also highlighted the difficulties law enforcement faces when a suspect is methodical and psychologically manipulative. In this case, Nermeen's alleged use of social media, phone, and bank accounts created an extended window in which the victim's disappearance could appear unremarkable. Each message, each transaction, each carefully crafted post was part of an effort to control the narrative and delay detection. This manipulation added an additional layer of horror, transforming the disappearance from a simple missing person case into a sophisticated, psychologically chilling criminal enterprise. By the time Nermeen Ufel was arrested, the investigation had reached a stage that would define the chilling contours of this case. Police had spent months piecing together fragments of a story that was as horrifying as it was methodical. Despite the absence of a body, the evidence was compelling enough to move forward with charges of murder and desecration of a body. The very notion of pursuing such charges without a corpse highlighted the extraordinary nature of the case and the meticulous work of detectives who had navigated a web of lies, deception, and psychological manipulation. The arrest itself was dramatic and revealing. Nermeen had admitted herself to Banks' house, an acute adult mental health unit at Bankstown Hospital. Police, acting on the evidence they had painstakingly collected, moved quickly, executing a crime scene warrant at the Greenacre home upon her admission. Detectives were keenly aware of the potential for flight, noting that Nermeen had property overseas and plans to travel. The risk was tangible. Without intervention, a suspect with both motive and means could easily escape before justice had a chance to intervene. During the arrest, investigators observed behaviors that reflected both vulnerability and calculated awareness. Nermeen reportedly exhibited signs of mental distress, speaking of hearing voices of angels, actions which the defense would later cite as evidence of her psychiatric challenges. But beneath this apparent fragility, police believed they were confronting a suspect capable of meticulous planning, careful deception, and an unsettling ability to compartmentalize both violence and pretense. The investigation into the Greenacre home revealed a scene that spoke to the extremes of calculated criminal behavior. Floors had been replaced, surfaces scrubbed, and traces of the alleged crime meticulously erased. Yet, forensic experts and detectives found enough residual evidence to reconstruct a timeline, estimate the method of killing, and assess the scale of the dismemberment and disposal. The level of preparation and cleanup was extraordinary, suggesting both premeditation and an understanding of how to minimize detection. Financial motives also came into sharp focus. Investigators discovered that following the alleged murder, Nermeen traveled to Egypt, acting on the power of attorney to sell properties formerly owned jointly with her husband. Upon returning to Australia, she brought back approximately $200,000, funds that were allegedly acquired in a manner that police describe as suspiciously timed with her husband's disappearance. Additionally, communications with Mamdou's fiancé in Egypt revealed attempts to claim money owed to him. These actions, investigators argue, added a financial dimension to what was already a highly personal and emotionally charged alleged crime. The Crown prosecutor, William Sitt, framed the motive as a combination of personal frustration and financial gain. He emphasized Nermeen's desire to escape an allegedly abusive marriage, combined with the opportunity presented by legal access to overseas properties. Police reports detailed a history of domestic violence, including incidents where Mamdou had allegedly threatened or assaulted his wife. The prosecution's argument suggested that the alleged murder was not impulsive, but premeditated, executed with both purpose and cold calculation. Witness testimony became a cornerstone of the Crown's case. Witness A reportedly observed behaviors that were both callous and incriminating on the night of the alleged murder. Another witness recounted statements from Nermeen that, while indirect, appeared to imply knowledge or responsibility for her husband's disappearance. Taken together with digital and financial evidence, these accounts painted a picture of someone orchestrating a complex and deadly scheme. The defense, led by Greg James KC, presented an alternate narrative, emphasizing Nermine's mental health struggles, depression, PTSD, and psychotic illness, including auditory hallucinations, formed the backbone of the argument that her actions were influenced by severe psychiatric conditions. The defense also highlighted the long history of abuse she allegedly suffered at the hands of her husband, framing the alleged act as one that might have been influenced by provocation or self-defense. According to the defense, these factors complicated any straightforward interpretation of intent. The Supreme Court bail hearing provided the public with further insight into the allegations. Judge Deborah Sweeney denied bail, citing the strength of the Crown's circumstantial case and the extreme nature of the alleged crime. The charges included the dismemberment of the body, disposal across multiple locations, and manipulation of social media and financial accounts to maintain the illusion that Mamdouh was alive. While the judge acknowledged Nermine's mental health issues, the potential threat to public safety and the risk of flight outweighed arguments for temporary release. Even without a body, the prosecution's case was bolstered by a meticulous reconstruction of events. Digital records, forensic analysis, witness accounts, and financial transactions all formed a mosaic of evidence. Each piece reinforced the allegation that Nermine had both motive and means, and that the crime had been carried out with chilling precision. Police characterized the planning, execution, and aftermath as indicative of a deliberate and calculated act, rather than a spontaneous response to provocation. The psychological dimension of the case was as unsettling as the physical acts alleged. Authorities suggested that the combination of violence, deception, and manipulation reflected a sophisticated awareness of both criminal procedure and human perception. By controlling the narrative through social media, banking, and communication channels, Nermine allegedly created an illusion of normalcy that delayed suspicion and misled those closest to Mamdouh. This manipulation not only complicated the investigation, but also deepened the horror of the crime, demonstrating a level of premeditation that transcended typical domestic homicide scenarios. As court proceedings continued, the absence of Mamdouh's remains became a haunting focal point. Police doubted that the body would ever be recovered, and the case began to intersect with legal frameworks concerning victims whose remains are never found. Under NSW law, withholding the location of a victim's body can lead to life imprisonment and prevent parole, highlighting the severity of the alleged cover-up and the enduring consequences for justice. Public reaction was a mixture of fear, disbelief, and morbid fascination. The idea that a wife could allegedly murder and dismember her husband, then manipulate perception to delay detection, struck a nerve in communities across Sydney and beyond. True crime enthusiasts and local residents alike grappled with the tension between domestic normalcy and extreme violence, a stark reminder that horrific acts can unfold behind the most familiar facades. Meanwhile, investigators continued to trace Nermine's movements and financial transactions. Travel to Egypt, property sales, and subsequent purchases of shares in the UAE were analyzed for connections to motive and opportunity. Each step appeared deliberate, consistent with the Crown's assertion that the crime was premeditated and executed with both personal and financial objectives in mind. The trial, though still ongoing, framed the narrative in stark contrast. The prosecution portrayed a calculated murderer exploiting opportunity, while the defense emphasized mental illness, abuse, and psychological distress. This tension between intent and circumstance, between calculated cruelty and claimed provocation, formed the psychological core of the courtroom drama. Jurors, lawyers, and observers were confronted not only with the facts of a violent crime, but with questions about human behavior under extreme stress, the role of mental illness, and the capacity for deception and manipulation. For Mamdouh's family, the impact was devastating. 8 adult children suddenly faced the disappearance and alleged murder of their father, compounded by the absence of physical remains and the unsettling public nature of the case. Friends and extended family grappled with a mixture of grief, anger, and disbelief, while investigators worked tirelessly to reconstruct the sequence of events that had led to one of the most disturbing domestic homicides in recent Australian history.